to a brand new episode of the Straight Up Show podcast. I am your host, Calvin, and today it is all about mental health. And like, guys, as you know, if you listen to this podcast, you know that I am someone who is kind of like, I'm in the in between. I was born in '89, but I only been in the '80s for 3 months. So technically, I'm the '80s slash '90s baby. I don't know. But through this period of time, I've got to see where we had landline phones to like cell phones the size of your face to floppy disks to getting internet at Walmart on a disc and things that, you know, transcendent. And one things I always talk about is to see the transformation of social media. And it has definitely impacted so many people. And social media can be a great tool, but also can be a bad tool to where it can impact people's lives. A famous rapper by the name of Boosie, he once said that social media is this generation's version of the crack epidemic. It's addicting. It costs people their lives and it destroys relationships. And I kind of have to agree with that. It is the brand new version of, I would say, our crack epidemic of the world, basically. And today we want to talk about this basically social media versus mental health. And if you are a avid listener of this podcast, you know we take mental health very seriously. We've had some previous psychologists on the show, and today is no different. This person I met her and her co-partner. They're going to an Eagles concert here in Vegas, and we got a chance to meet, and we talked about mental health, and it was just sporadic how it happened, and then so she agreed to come on the podcast today. So without further ado, my guest today talk about all mental health and the social media versus social media is no other than Dr. Jamie Micco. Jamie, thank you so much for coming on the podcast today.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, and so we met in Vegas, and so we met, and y'all were going to a Eagles concert. First off, how was the concert at the Sphere?
It was amazing. It exceeded expectations. It was a really good time.
Yeah, and so you and Ben are going to the Sphere. Okay, so just a quick disclaimer. Okay, so that was your first time at the Sphere, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So for those who have never been to Vegas or been to the Sphere, just tell them how cool was it because they don't understand.
Yeah, I honestly didn't know what to expect. I saw the outside of it, and it's images that are larger than life on the outside. And you go in, and it's this very modern set of escalators and places to get drinks, and then you actually enter the Sphere, and it's like nothing I've ever seen. It was like being outdoors and in the setting or the movie set, really. But obviously, it was all a visual illusion.
Yeah.
So sitting down, and then throughout the concert, they just they put so many different visuals in front of you that you felt like sometimes you were in a car driving, and sometimes it felt like you were in the woods. It was amazing. It was really cool.
Now, tell me if I'm crazy or not, right? Is it me or is it bigger inside than the outside? Does it seem
I
like
mean,
it?
it seems bigger, but I wonder if that's part of the illusion.
Yeah. It was definitely bigger than me. So, and it's just, I was like, man, I had so much fun. Now, I didn't go to a concert. I'm going to prepare for this. I'm going to a Backstreet Boys concert this summer at the Sphere. So don't hate, but hey,
But I'm kind of hating because I think I would have really enjoyed Backstreet Boys too.
come on back. Come on back.
I mean, I might have to. Well, you may recall that the reason we were in Vegas was we were attending a conference. We were
Right.
attending the Anxiety and Depression of Association of America conference, and so that's how we got talking about mental health.
And like I said, and you agreed to come on the podcast. And big shout out to your partner Ben. Ben, thank you so much for being cool and that conversation we had. Let me ask you this: so before we get started, just tell people about who you are, where you're from, and how long you've been, and what do you do basically.
Okay, I'll do my best to do the short version. So I'm in the generation a bit before you. I'm they sometimes called the micro generation and exennial. So somebody was born right on that cusp of being completely without digital technology and then suddenly being thrown into it. So we had the best of both worlds of the childhood without social media and lots of video games and tech use, although we had a little bit, and then it's still being young enough to learn how to use technology as we were in college and so forth. So I understand what you're saying about a very different world at this point for youth compared to when we were growing up. I grew up in Ohio, outside of Cleveland, and went to Boston to go to college. I went to Boston University for my undergraduate work. And then I went straight into my PhD program in clinical psychology at BU. So just remained there. I felt like I was a lifer. And went on after my graduate work to do my uh, pre-doctoral internship and then postdoctoral work at Massachusetts General Hospital, where I stayed for about, I think, a little over a decade, doing clinical research, often with youth experiencing anxiety, OCD, and depression, as well as clinical work. By the point I moved on from Mass General, I was running an intensive program for adolescents with severe anxiety disorders, among other things. And then, at some point, I made the choice to start my own practice, leaving Mass General, although I never fully left. I'm still affiliated with MGH and Harvard Medical School as a supervisor and part of the child track training program that they have going on for psychologists there. But I left and started a solo practice for a few years while my youngest was still a baby. And then Ben, who you met, he and I connected under similar kind of career circumstances and made a choice to start a group practice, which is called the Concord Center. And at the Concord Center, we currently we have 19 clinicians, including ourselves, and we treat the broad range of mental health problems across the lifespan, but we do especially see kids, adolescents, and young adults. So in my own work, I work very often with teenagers and college-aged youth, and so I feel I can speak a lot about their use of social media and I guess the pros and cons of that use.
Yeah, and thank you so much for that proper introduction for that. And it's crazy because I think that like when I brought it up to you that I want to talk about this is like that was something that you all were doing at the conference, right? Like you said that y'all were talking about that. What did you learn at that conference? Because Vegas is really known for having these crazy conferences, and from broad range of having a furry conference to, to having doctors to, I'm serious. That was, you're laughing, but
I believe, no, I believe it.
and I tell y'all, like I'm telling y'all, if y'all have not been to Vegas, Dr. Jamie can tell you that basically it's crazy out here. But to have that conference with a bunch of psychologists and you all were talking about social media, what did you learn from that conference, and what did y'all get out of the whole thing?
Well, so one of the biggest things, and I was on a panel discussing this very topic, and it was more of a discussion because I felt like none of us felt like we were the key experts. But one of the keynote presenters, who is a developmental researcher at PhD level, her name is Dr. Candace Ogden. I think I may be mispronouncing her last name. She gave a lovely keynote that really sort of turned the tables on how I was thinking about youth and the use of social media and technology and its effects on mental health. So typically, people are thinking, oh, social media, it's all bad, it's causing depression, it's causing anxiety. And the reasons we think that in part are because of some correlational research that was done in the 2000s, 2010s that showed this like huge uptick in youth anxiety and depressive disorders around the time that the iPhone became very popular. So before then, like, you could see these graphs, you can see people marching along, doing, typical levels of anxiety and depression, and then a big uptick in high school and older in terms of those disorders. So people are like, well, obviously it must be the use of cell phones and the ways that people are interacting with each other on social media. But it may be that we don't have all of the answers with that, because one of the big things you learn as a researcher is that correlation does not equal causation. So we can't say for sure that that's what may have been happening to increase those levels of disorders. And what Dr. Ogden was talking about at the keynote was actually, if you look at some of these huge data sets, it seems that a lot of kids or youth are doing just fine with their technology use. Like they're not experiencing these huge upticks, but the kids who are already vulnerable, so the kids that already are prone to anxiety, depression, OCD, and body image concerns, are the ones that then have exacerbations or increases in mental health problems. So it's not necessarily social media leads to this, but the interaction effect of already being vulnerable, perhaps using technology and social media in ways that then reinforce some of those mental health problems.
And we're going to definitely unpack a little bit more of what you just said about
Sure.
just basically just these groups of people. And then, crazy thing about it, that a lot of stuff didn't start until technology got more advanced, especially with the iPhones. We're going to have more with Dr. Jamie Micco on the other side of the break. Make sure you stay tuned to the Straight Up Show podcast.
Speaking straight up means to be able to speak in a way that is straight up, to be honest, and to speak your truth.
Raw, uncut, you know what I mean? It's blunt, straight to the point. This what it is.
It's just a place to be open and honest, and that's what I appreciate most about it. And it provides a place for community members to come together and just be straight up with each other about things that are going on in the world, because it affects all of us.
Unfiltered, raw, with all the cursing that Calvin does.
Straight up is just being real, telling it like it is, being you.
Being solid, being who you are, no matter what it is, no matter what situation you're faced with. Right, this is who you are. It really speaks to me, saying it is what it is and it ain't what it ain't. Straight up.
Our world is made up of roughly 8 billion people. People of different races, different cultures, and different languages. And sometimes being different is often frowned upon due to a number of things. But here at Straight Up, we believe it's our job as people to sit at the table, learn from each other, in hopes of making our world into a better place to live. So join us as we have these cultural conversations. Only on the Straight Up Show podcast.
All right, welcome back to the Straight Up Show podcast. This is Calvin. I am your host today. And today I have a special guest, one of the coolest people I've met. And just, I've met people from Boston, but I think her and Ben definitely some of the coolest people because I met them going to the Eagles concert at the Sphere here in Vegas. So without further ado, once again, my guest today is clinical psychologist, Dr. Jamie Micco. Jamie, thank you so much for coming on the podcast today.
Of course.
All right. And so we're talking about social media versus mental health. And like I said, you've been doing this quite some time and you've seen this. And like I said, you learned some things when you came out here to Vegas in your conference. And I think with social media, we talked about how the whole adage now is that it's kind of this generation's version of the crack epidemic, I guess, in a way, because it's so addicting. Everyone does it. And when you wake up, sometimes the first thing you do is look at your phone and look on social media. So like I said, once again, when you starting off right quick, in your practice, when it comes to social media and dealing with adolescents and young adults, what do you see the most common issue is when it comes to social media and mental health?
Ooh, great question. I think there's a few. One I would say is the information that is out there about mental health problems in the first place. This is one of the things that a colleague of mine, Regine Galante, was talking about at the conference. In that, when youth are on TikTok or seeing reels on Instagram, oftentimes information gets out there about mental health problems that isn't accurate, such that you can come to believe that you have a certain disorder because someone who's an influencer is talking about their symptoms and kind of oversimplifying some of it, to the point that then kids may believe that some of their normal experiences are actually abnormal, and so then by the time they might be seen in a clinic like mine, they're coming with self-diagnoses that are not necessarily accurate. And we have to do a lot of what we call psychoeducation around what those disorders are and what they may be experiencing. And it's not as though the self-diagnosis itself is a problem. But then if kids perhaps over-identify with those labels, it can, shape their behavior. So, for example, if you come to believe that you have ADHD without having a diagnosis from a qualified professional, you might, start thinking like, well, I can't study for long, or I can't do this. And then like, because of my ADHD, I, have XYZ kinds of problems. And it's like, okay, well, maybe that's possible, that's true, but maybe that's not exactly what's happening for you. So yeah, I guess misinformation about mental health problems is one thing. Another thing is, I guess, the ways in which people are interacting with each other in technology or social media. Sometimes I want to make sure I'm focusing on some positives too, because it isn't just all negative effects on mental health. There can be a lot of positive elements in being able to connect with friends. And especially if you are somebody who has a mental health disorder, sometimes it's an opportunity for you to connect with other people who share your experience with violating and or maybe you're able to find treatment that's available to you online, that if you live in a rural area or an underserved area, you're able to make connections with treatment programs using your computer versus going in person. So there's some positives there. And I think a lot of teenagers would say that they feel like they can have those closer connections with friends because of social media. The downsides are that a lot of things can be misinterpreted on social media. One of the biggest things I find with current like this generation of youth is lots of conversations that are being had with peers where they're misunderstanding each other because they're texting or chatting, direct messaging, and instead of having a face-to-face conversation and like seeing people's facial expressions or tone of voice, hearing tone of voice. And so many times, and it happens every week, I'm meeting with somebody who, struggles with anxiety or depression and OCD, and is saying like, oh, this is what this person is thinking, so I'm not going to talk to them anymore, or they'll be like trying to figure out what it is that they meant. And I'm like, hey, I wonder what would happen if we just set up a conversation with them. And then ultimately, if they do it, they come back and they're like, oh my gosh, you were right, and like have a conversation. I totally misunderstood, or they didn't hear me, or whatever. So I think sometimes that the loss of face-to-face communication is part of what increases anxiety, because there's a lot of uncertainty in direct messaging or texting. So I would say that's another problem. And then I guess in a worse way, sometimes then there can be things like cyberbullying or people taking advantage of other people online. I guess a couple examples that I've heard are like, and nothing goes away on the internet. So you might, like, when you're a younger kid, film something and put it on TikTok, and then like later somebody who might not like you finds that TikTok and then like reposts it or publishes it or takes it and puts it on a group chat, and then you're super embarrassed about what happened. And I would consider that a form of cyberbullying. And at worst, sometimes it's like calling people terrible names or putting rumors out there in ways. And then like there's a lot of exclusion as well. So on Snapchat, for example, a lot of the kids I've seen over time they can often follow locations where kids are. Oh, did you not know that? Yeah.
Not like that. No, that's crazy.
So like where all your friends are, and if
Right.
they're all in the same place without you, think about how that feels. So
Right.
like they went to the mall, but she had said that she wasn't available to hang out with me, but clearly they went to go hang out without me. And obviously that can happen, and it can be a misunderstanding, or it could be like that person sparing the other person's feelings. It's not always horribly malicious, but it increases that feeling of being left out or not included. And so then that reinforces like low self-esteem.
Did not know all this. Like, it's crazy. Like, I thank God, because I'm like, because back then, I think the closest to technology we had to recording video was like the Razor phone, and like basically,
right, I had a Razor.
Remember that one? Yeah. And so it's like I said, I can tell you right now, back then in my high school and college days, I had a couple viral moments that thank God that technology
Oh, for sure.
was not was not
Same.
there.
I don't want a lot of what
And I'm a
was
big boy
happening.
too, and I had some big boy funny moments. You know what I mean? So like,
Mm.
it definitely was. I was prone to have a viral moment if their technology was back then. I want before you said all this, right? And something that stood out to me that I don't know if you noticed it or not, because like I said, I'm kind of like back and forth on social media.
Mhm.
As a professional and a clinical psychologist, I don't know if you've noticed this, and I talked about this with previous Dr. Aaron Johnson about how there are a lot of quote unquote influencers uh,
Mhm.
who pose as professionals online,
Yeah.
and they use their platforms to not only give advice,
Yeah.
but they're kind of posing as professionals and charging people to like talk to them and stuff like that. Uh, can you debunk this and can you tell people on social media how dangerous it can be to pose as like a mental health expert or someone who can help you with your issues?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of the influencers are well-meaning, and that they feel like they have good information to share, but they almost overextend their areas of expertise. Like a lot of times, like you said, they're not mental health professionals. Rather, they're people who take an interest in mental health, and it's not as though all of the information they're sharing is inaccurate, but sometimes if you come to trust people, especially as they become more famous. I mean, you may not know this, but Dr. Phil is not a licensed psychologist. I think either relinquished his license or never got it in the first place, so that he could do his show without the constraints of the licensing board.
I didn't know.
So not to diminish his credentials, but at the same time, like lots of times, people are kind of going in a more extreme direction with the information that they may be sharing. And so I know that there's a big push right now with among psychologists at least, and I'm sure many other mental health professionals to get more accurate information out there from people who are doing this work day in, day out. And I think it's on us to be working harder to counter some of the misinformation that's out there, even if it seems really flashy and easy. Like a lot of the things that I think maybe you're referring to are like, hey, 3 easy steps to getting rid of your anxiety forever. And it's like, no, everybody's got anxiety. If we got rid of anxiety forever, we would never jump out of the way of a speeding car if it was coming towards us. Like it's something that's really important for us to have. And even people with anxiety disorders, there can be useful things about that anxiety. It just tends to go into like false alarm mode a lot of the time. And so it's actually not helpful to tell somebody to get rid of their anxiety because A, it makes it harder when that anxiety shows up, and B, the anxiety serves its own purpose. And so people can end up feeling more demoralized if they follow the 3 steps, and that doesn't work. And so I think that's an example of something where we could be really better about countering some of the messages out there
I
about
think
mental
I think what scares me is that I've seen a plethora of influencers, try to use like, they are somewhat, or they're going to school to be a professional therapist or psychologist, and they're
health.
using their platform to not only just like, say they can help people, but they're charging people too. So I'm pretty sure
Oh,
there's some illegal.
oh, yeah, I'm sure.
It's very illegal doing that, right? Am I correct? Is that kind of illegal to do that? Like,
Yeah, I mean, I haven't seen as much of that, but I'm sure that's happening out there where
yeah.
people without licenses are selling services or selling packages. Sometimes, there's a field called life coaching that isn't very well regulated. I'm sure there's lovely life coaches, and then there's probably others who really don't have the proper training in order to help people who are struggling.
Right. And it's like Kim Kardashian, right? I'm not knocking her, but it's like her using her influence to give legal advice. And it's like,
Right.
because she's so popular, people follow that message. And
Right.
that's what just scares me the most is that a lot of people sit there and like just, want to follow these influencers and, especially on social media, and then use their
Mhm.
word as like bond. Their word is
Yeah.
just and that's what scares me the most. Yeah.
Yeah, I think you're right. And this is definitely something that's come up. And again, we have to do a better job getting the real solid information out there for not only kids, but everybody.
It's a lot, y'all. I'm learning so much from Dr. Jamie Micco, and we're gonna have a little bit more to Dr. Jamie Micco about some coping methods when it comes to social media and your mental health. Make sure you stay tuned to the Straight Up Show podcast. Years ago, my family had us scared when we thought my mom had breast cancer. It was painful to see her go through all the testing and witnessing her be just as scared. Fortunately, she did not have breast cancer, but millions of women and men aren't as lucky. So we here at Straight Up are supporting and standing with those who are battling and have survived breast cancer with our official breast cancer awareness merchandise. Just visit our website, straightupshowpodcast.com, and get yours today. All proceeds will be donated to local breast cancer foundations. So we encourage you not only to get educated, but join us as we stand straight up to breast cancer.
Voting. It's a right, a privilege, and a responsibility. Many have made the ultimate sacrifice just so we could have the ability to vote on what we believe is best for us and our community. So, we here at Straight Up ask you to do your research, let your voice be heard, and be proud to say, I straight up voted.
We are from CBT. Tune in to the Straight Up Show podcast.
All right, welcome back to the Straight Up Show podcast. I am your host, Calvin. Today, we're talking about social media and mental health. And today, I have the wonderful guest, Dr. Jamie Micco. Once again, thank you so much for coming on the podcast today.
My pleasure.
All right, clinical therapist, psychologist, and you've been doing great work, especially in the Boston area. And I just want to say that you've already kind of inspired me today, just telling me all these things I haven't learned about just social media. And like I said, I'm kind of, even though I'm a part of social media, I'm not a part of social media. Kind of hate it, love it, but and I've seen because I'm a bigger guy, right? And I'm pretty sure that I can post one thing. Now I've worked in news, so I'm used to body shaming, and I've been on TV, so I'm used to that. But people who try to put themselves on social media and they just see these negative comments and they just it just kills them, kills their anxiety. What are some ways people can kind of combat that? And what do you see that helps maybe some of your patients deal with cyberbullying or just the whole overall anxiety when it comes to self-esteem and just, self-preservation?
Well, yeah, I think one of the ways that tends to come up the most is in thinking of my teenage clients in particular and young adults who often will go on social media and almost spend hours comparing themselves to other people that have posted, whether it's peers or role models, celebrities. And so there's a term called attention bias in psychology, which is where your attention tends to be drawn to something that you find particularly threatening. And if you are somebody who might be struggling with body image, you're going to be more likely to make these negative comparisons, having your attention drawn to, quote, skinny or muscular models or peers in ways that then make you feel worse about yourself. And then there's that confirmation bias where you're looking for people in particular and saying, see, look, they look better than me. I'm ugly, fat, whatever label that they're applying to themselves because they're trying to make themselves feel better, finding people who look more like them. But because of that attention bias, they tend to focus more on people who they feel are fitter or better looking. So that's one way that I've seen it play out. not to even mention cyberbullying. And so one of the things we'll talk a lot about, and this is probably one of the most important things, is like you can't just tell somebody that they need to get off of social media, especially kids and adolescents and adults. They don't want to hear what you have to say. They find a lot of benefits from it. It's relaxing. But, so it's not like, hey, you're spending so much time. Did you know that this is really bad for your mental health? No. Rather, it's going to be a lot more important to keep it as an open conversation of like, how are you feeling about your relationship with social media and technology? Like, if you had to change anything, what might you change? How do you feel about the amount of time that you spend on it? If you weren't spending that time on social media, what would you be doing instead? Is there something that you feel like you may be missing out on because you catch yourself scrolling through TikTok or getting caught up in messaging with people? And that can open it up a little bit more for people to reflect on for themselves of like, how well is this working for me? Versus like, oh, my mom or my therapist or my friend thinks that I do too much on social media. And so I often will have those conversations and then set some very specific goals. Like, hey, okay, so when you get home from school, can you put your phone in another room so that you can focus more on homework? Because you said it's important for you to get good grades. Or, oh, you mentioned that you wanted to spend more time outside with friends, like maybe playing basketball. So how can you go straight from school to basketball so that you're not tempted to get caught up in social media when you get home? So just doing some real problem solving around like, what are you actually going to do to make it so that you don't get caught up in unhealthy patterns or cycles? For the kids who get themselves caught up like making comparisons online, you can go as far as like use tools. If there's apps that you can use that kind of block or control social media, so you can have it so that you just can't access it altogether. Lots of times my patients will just remove it from their phones for a period of time so they feel like they can kind of get back into the habit again of being off of it. But if that seems too draconian for them, then they might have like use an app that just says like, after 1 hour, cut me off or give me a signal that like that time is up. A lot of my patients will say they can blow through those reminders. So I find the ones that like really cut you off to be much more helpful. Or if you have to put in a password to reaccess it, then like having a trusted friend who you give the password to so that if you must get back on it, they'll let you, but otherwise like, you're held accountable.
It's like a drug. It really is.
It is. It is like you have to find ways to reduce and manage your use, moderate, if you will.
Two more questions, if you may. I'm trying to tell the best way to word this without sounding offensive. Social media is definitely a place of escapism, and finding people who are part of your community that you may not have around you. But when it comes to perception of social media's life, and then the perception of reality, how can one balance that? Because like I said, we grew up in a time to where we play outside and be home before the streetlights come on and whatever, right? So, but I really think that, is there a way to deal with the social media reality compared to your own self reality around you? How do you cope with that?
Ooh, I think that's a really tricky one. I think one of the primary ways that I'll encourage people to kind of be more present and mindful of their reality outside of technology is to get more involved in things in their community, wherever that may be. So like I'm the mom of 2 kids, preteens, and who love their technology for sure. And we do a lot of like planning out activities that don't involve our technology. So they dance a lot, many hours a week, and they engage in community theater and school theater, and one of them runs track. And it's like, let's try to find activities that are really meaningful to you, that involve interacting with peers, that keep you grounded and present so that you're not getting kind of sucked into the reality of being online. And I think as a middle-aged person, I don't understand it as well as probably younger people about like my online world, because I don't distinguish that as much from my actual life as perhaps younger people might. But it is important to recognize that, like, as you were saying before, not everything you see online is the real, like, truth with a capital T. To notice, like, if something doesn't feel right, or something doesn't sound right, maybe to question it and do a little bit more research themselves, or don't take it, especially if it's an interaction with a peer, as I was saying before, maybe take it offline so that it's more of that conversation in real life. I mean, people talk about this a lot, that our attention spans have been compromised because we're like constantly bombarded with these 3-second, I'm exaggerating, but, like, very short videos. And so then our ability to be mindful and staying present diminishes. And so, oftentimes as part of our work as mental health providers is that we are encouraging people to practice those things again. So noticing things around you, taking 5 or 10 minutes to center yourself, be aware of, like, what your 5 senses are telling you. And I think that's another strategy to kind of bridge those worlds, if you will.
Those are good points. I guess my last question would be just, when they announced that TikTok may be going away and stuff like that, do you think this generation can deal with the complete absence of social media? And if so, or if not, how do you think if social media should go away, or in a way, like, how do you think that people react, and, like, what do you think can happen?
Oh, wow. Great question. I mean, people, when some of my patients and people I know, when TikTok might have been going away, there was like a small subset who were like, I'm horrified. And I, like, read in the paper, like, somebody was going to, I don't know, like, sue TikTok because they were so worried. Okay. But a lot of people actually were like, maybe this is what I need. It's like, if I can't have it, then, phew, relief. Then I'm not going to get myself sucked in so much anymore. I heard that multiple times. So that's something to keep in mind, that, like, maybe this generation actually can handle it very well if it's something that, like, ultimately is taking up a lot of their time in ways that they don't like, but that, for the reasons you mentioned before, it's so addictive to keep scrolling, because it's designed that way, that, they want to get a break from. Yeah, I guess that's a long-winded answer to say that, yeah, I actually think they could handle it really well. And it, it might just be a difficult period at first if it were to entirely go away.
I just feel like that, like, when that happened, they announced it, and they go, I think it went for like a day or two, I think. And then, like, they were so quick to try to replace it, immediately.
Right. Which is why I think that's a pie in the sky idea. Like, if there was an apocalypse and we didn't have social media anymore, sure, maybe they'd be a little more present and mindful, but probably not going to happen.
All right. Final question. Basically, before we leave, and I want to thank you so much for coming on the podcast today. You did a wonderful job. Before we leave, what's like a message that you can give to teenagers, young adults, and those of social media? What's your final message to them? Something positive they can kind of go off on, and what you say.
Yeah, so I think it's what I was saying before around, like, be real with yourself. You know what works for you and what doesn't in managing your life. And you probably know if you're spending more time engaging in social media than you wish, or maybe you're spending exactly the right amount of time. Ask yourself some difficult questions about, like, are there things that I may be missing out on, or that are not part of my life that I want to be part of my life because of my relationship with technology and social media? And if that's yes, then maybe start to think about how you can gradually incorporate more of what you want, and reduce the use that you don't want. And there's a lot of help to do that online. Like I was mentioning before, there's apps, there's people who can help you in the form of mental health professionals or school counselors. So, if that's what you want, then it's possible.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Jamie Micco. Thank you once again for coming on our Show podcast. Did a wonderful job. And before you go, how can people follow you in your office and follow you on social media?
Yeah, so the Concord Center is on social media. We've been working really hard lately to get more of a presence on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn at Concord Center, and our website is www.concordcbt.com. We have a lot of good programs for youth and adults, especially coming up this summer in the Boston area. If people want to check that out, please do.
All right. And if you're watching the show, we'll have all the information on the ticker below. If you're listening, we'll have all the information for the Concord on the episode description. So with that being said, Dr. Jamie Micco, thank you so much for coming on Show Podcast.
Thank you so much for having me.
All right. And y'all, that's the end of our show. I want to give once again a big thank you to Dr. Jamie Micco for giving us her time. Met her in Vegas, met her and Ben, great people. The conversation is not over just yet. We have more of the episode on our podcast at stripshowpodcast.com. That's STR8upshowpodcast.com. There you can see our other mental health experts talk about mental health. You can see Jamie's episode today, Dr. Jamie Micco's episode today. Also, if you want to support the podcast, make sure you go to stripshowpodcast.com/patreon.com 318. That's patreon.com/stripshowpodcast 318. There we go. Got it now. But that's not the end of our show. Make sure you come back. But if you do come back, there's only one rule to our show. You got to be
straight up.
All right. See you guys later.